All right, so today I'm going to show you how to draw a proportional figure that you will use in all of your costume designs. So you are going to need a sheet of paper. You're also going to need a ruler of some kind, and I strongly suggest using a pencil. You can use a mechanical pencil if you want to. You can use a pen, but you have to be really careful about what you're doing if you're using a pen. So the first thing you're going to do is align your paper vertically. So our figure is going to go here in the middle of our drawing. We're going to use the ruler because essentially the human body is broken up into 8 different heads. So if you want to think about yourself, picture your head and then take your head and divide it all the way down your body. So a perfectly proportioned person would be exactly 8 of their own heads tall. And so that is what we are going to try and replicate on our paper today. So in order to do that, you are going to take your ruler, and since this is a 12-inch ruler, we aren't going to make a line every inch because that gives us a 12 head tall person who looks really, really weird. So you're going to go every 1.5 inches. So with your ruler in the middle, try to center it as best as you can. In the middle of your paper, go down to 1.5 inches and make a little mark, and then down to 3 inches, 4.5 inches, 6 inches, 7.5, 9, 10.5, and then your last mark at 12 inches. So these are now going to become these horizontal lines. So line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we are going to number these as line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now you don't have to number this 1 through 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but it does kind of help to take into consideration where each of your elements happens. So we're going to start with our head. So as we can see, our head, the chin rests on the bottom of line number 1. So we are going to be dealing with up here. If we think about a human head is not a perfect circle. It is not even a perfect oval. It's actually more of an egg with the thin part down at the chin. So when you're drawing the head, I usually start with the chin. And I'm just going to draw a very generic kind of androgynous figure that could be female, could be male, and I'll explain how to differentiate it between female and male later. If you are drawing a traditionally male figure, your chin is probably going to be a little bit more squared off. Or if you think about your character's persona, if they are more of a strong-willed type of character, then you can give them a little bit more of a squared off chin instead of a pointy chin. So the top of the head is part of our line. So the bottom of our line is there, for that's that. And then the top of the head comes in here. So traditionally, this is our forehead, and we're gonna curve this down to meet our chin. And it's all right if at this point your person looks like an alien. That's probably going to happen. Depending upon how narrow you make it, it'll look a little more or less alien-ish. If the fact that you've got a big blank balloon staring at you kind of messes with your head, you can kind of throw in a general line for eyes and nose. And then we've got the resemblance of a face. If you want to try to put ears in, they always need to go in line with the eyes. If we put our ears down here, then they're really bizarre. And if we put our ears up here, then they are a mouse or a bear. So you also don't want your ears to stick out too far because this character is not Dumbo the elephant who can fly. And even there, you can see my ears are not symmetrical. This ear is a lot lower than this ear. So sometimes you just have to erase and try again. This is why I really strongly suggest using pencil. Depending upon your character's hairstyle, you don't even need to worry about ears at all, especially thinking if the character's hair will be covering their ears, then you don't need to worry about it. And you can go back to your little balloon-headed alien. All right, next we are gonna move down to the shoulders. So this is a point that can get kind of tricky for some people because either their shoulders are attached to their ears, or their shoulders are at their waist, or their shoulders are too narrow, or their shoulders are too wide. So one way to kind of contradict that is to look that the shoulders are essentially 2 head lengths. So you are going to take your head shape up here, our 1.5 inches, and turn it on its side both ways. If we also notice, the armpit roughly starts about at line 2. So what I usually do at this point is put in a little bit of a V where I think that the armpit is gonna fall, and I might have to change this later. So if we've got our character's spine, if we think about the character's spine going down like this, and let's make that line a little heavier so that you can actually see it, and go back and erase it later. If this is our armpits, our shoulders have to end somewhere between line 1 and line 2. And remember, our shoulders are our head width each way. So I'm gonna line up on our center spine, 1.5, and make a mark out here. That'll be the edge of a shoulder. And then 3, this will be the mark of another shoulder over here. Now, again, if your character is especially muscular, your shoulders might be wider. If your character is more dainty, your shoulders might be a tad bit narrower, but always try to maintain that perspective. So this is always a tricky part to get them looking normal. So it helps for me if I start my neck. So for me, our necks do not come just underneath of our chin. Our necks start behind our ears. So try to sketch in from roughly wherever you think that ear might have been, a neck that comes down. Again, your neck can depict your character. If they have a thinner neck, that might appear more elegant, more dainty. However, remember, your neck still has to support your head. So if your neck gets like super thin, then your character looks out of proportion and they kind of look like a goose or a snake, and you don't want that. So play around with it. Erasing is your friend, and try to get a neck that looks like it fits your body. Also, if we look at this, our necks don't just go straight out to our shoulders. We have muscles that curve down and then back shoulder muscles that attach farther out here. So you want to bring your shoulder muscles out over the side and then over your shoulders. If you go straight down, our shoulders are going to look as though they are curved in or your person is hunched. So depending upon what type of posture you want to give your person, the muscles can come down, but then kind of curve back up for that shoulder. So the way you draw your shoulders is also going to be dependent upon the characteristics of your character. Is this a broader, stronger figure, or is this a more dainty, delicate figure? Okay, so notice over here, my armpit is a little too far to the side. So I'm going to have to move my armpit in just a little bit and bring my arm, my bicep, out. Now, when I make my little triangles for my armpits, it really isn't like that. It isn't a true V, because depending upon how the arm is positioned, our arms usually rest flat against our bodies. So this is just more of an indication of where the chest is versus the arm. So if we look at this, we've got our head, we've got our upper chest. Now we need to get our mid-torso and our waist. So a lot of times when we're drawing this, people are like, no way is your waist that high. Yes way, your natural waist is that high. If you feel around on your own body, find your belly button, and then lean to the side, you will find a natural depression underneath of your lowest ribs. That is your actual natural waist. Where you actually wear your pants has no impact on where your biological waist is. And so when we are drawing figures and proportions, we need the waist to be where the biological waist is. And that is at our third line. Notice also here, elbows coincidentally fit right at our natural waist. So a lot of times when we're drawing things, we don't want to make it look like we've got monkey arms, so we naturally draw our arms too short. Our elbows hit right here, just barely above that third line. So if we come out here and we're looking at our figure, our elbow has to come in just a little bit before this third line because our waist occurs at this third line. All right, now you have to decide how broad your waist is going to be. Just like with the shoulders, waists tend to have somewhat of a proportion to a head as well. Instead of fitting two heads end to end sideways, for the waist, generally, you can fit two heads side by side vertically. So what we have to do is come back to our drawing and measure how wide we drew our head. So my head is just about 1 inch wide. So that means that my waist needs to be roughly 2 inches wide. And we would bring our torso figure down like this. Now on this side, our arm is overlapping our waist, so we can't see that gap like we do over here. The next little bit between 3 and 4 is kind of boring, but this is essentially your abdomen zone. So this is a point where we can actually screw up as well. If we put our natural separation of essentially the crotch line too high, our legs are going to be too long. You need to resist the urge to put that natural separation on line 4. It has to go in between lines 4 and 5. So at this point, we're really just kind of smoothing out into the hip region. If we look at our arms, our wrist is going to hit right at that line number 4. We want to bring our arm down, and hands are really super hard to draw, for me at least. I have always struggled. I make my wrists too tiny, or I make my hands gigantic, or something else weird happens. So if we look at this, the way they suggest is kind of essentially a claw formation. You get the outer part of your hand, you get the fingers, you get them curving up, there's the thumb. And so if your hands look like lobster claws, I'm perfectly okay with that because that is pretty much how all of my hands end up looking. All right, so on this side, remember this side of the body is coming out over here. All right, so we've just completed that. Now we're moving on to between lines 4 and 5. And so this is essentially our crotch region, for lack of a better terminology. Remember that separation happens between lines 4 and 5 in the midway point. So you don't need to worry about doing your nice thigh gap here, because in all probability, that's probably gonna get covered up. Especially if you are drawing a female in almost any other time period other than modern history, we're never gonna see that because of the lay of the garments. So here, this arm, actually both my arms, are almost too short, but that's okay. We're gonna go ahead and go with it. Now, again, if our androgynous person is messing with your mind, you can add in pectoral muscles. I'll do another video about how to differentiate your drawings between male and female later. Right now, we're just trying to get a good basic drawing. All right, so we are on to the next step, which is essentially just all of our legs. So if we look at the difference between 5, 6, and 7, and 8, between 5 and 6, that at line 6 is where your knees are supposed to be. Again, try not to put your knees too high or your knees too low, or else the rest of your figure is going to look out of order. So you also have to somewhat decide, are we looking straight on at the knee? Is this knee kind of leg bent? Think about your own legs, because our legs kind of come in at our knee and then sometimes go back out at a calf, depending upon how our body is formulated. So if this is a knee, our little kneecap there, at our kneecap there, okay, that guy's calf, he did not skip leg day at all. All right, so now if we look at the difference between 6, 7, and 8, 7 hits essentially mid-calf, and then 8 is awkward because 8 is essentially the heel of the foot. And then below 8 is the toes, to give it that impression that it is actually standing on something. So if this is mid-calf on this leg, and the heel is supposed to hit on line 8, you don't want your foot to get too weird. But again, feet are kind of like hands. They're really awkward and weird to draw. So also, again, think about what costume you're designing. We may not actually see the character's feet because the costume might cover their feet, and that's okay. So on our other side, it's harder almost to draw a leg that is facing toward you because it gets super easy for you to lose proportion. All right, so this is how we're going to design a very basic figure drawing.